Well, good afternoon everybody and welcome back to another film. So what's happened today is that it's now mid-afternoon, sun's really high in the sky. There it is, that's the whitethroat, very scratchy type of song. Just in the little sycamore behind me there. So yeah, I've come to this meadow to photograph the buttercups and other wildflowers that are growing amongst the grasses there, but it's just too bright right now, so I'm just going to chill here and enjoy a bit of peace and quiet in the sunshine. And it's quite warm actually, and I'm sitting here with a big thick coat on because when I came out this morning it was quite chilly. So I've been to a couple of locations earlier today. I decided to go to locations that weren't in woodland. I suppose everybody else is photographing bluebells at this time of year, but there was a couple of shots that I've had my eye on that I've probably missed in years gone by because of shooting bluebells in woodland, and I wanted to go and grab them today whilst the opportunity was there, and these particular subjects were in the perfect condition with the right light. So I'm going to cast you back 2 or 3 hours now, and then you can see what I've been getting up to earlier on today, and then I'll catch you back here in just a few minutes. So welcome to the first location. This particular spot is an area that I've had my eye on for a couple of weeks now. It's right close to my house, so it's been an easy one to watch. The reason I'm interested in this particular field, it's not overly botanically rich, but it's got lots of dandelions in it, and I've been watching those develop over the last 2 weeks. And at this time of year, the first flush of flowers are now setting seed, and it's these seed heads that I'm really interested in. We call them dandelion clocks, and I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, will have heard of that term. So I've got 2 shots in my mind's eye. Whether I can find them, that's always going to be the challenge when it comes to pre-visualising a shot over going out and just shooting whatever turns up. So the first shot, more of a representation, will be a single dandelion clock head just popping out amongst a sea of green. Now the difficulty with that is finding a seed head or a clock that's got no distractions front and back and is low enough in the grassland that I don't get the sky, and also that the grassland doesn't become a distraction either in front of or behind the subject matter. That's probably the easiest of the 2 images that I've got in my mind this morning for this location. The second image is going to be more difficult, I'm sure, because I need a tight cluster of clock heads for this to work, and my plan is to just do something a little bit more abstract, focusing on a tiny part of the clock head but using the other clock heads around it or seed heads around it to provide a nice soft out of focus sea of white almost. Looking around, I can't see any tight clusters. In fact, because of the wind, which is picking up from time to time, has blown a lot of the seed heads off in the last 24 hours, which is a bit annoying, because just behind me here there's a group that's really quite clumped together, and that might have provided me with that second shot. But it's quite a big field and there's other fields to go at should I get stuck. So I'll have a wander around now, and I'll get back to you when I find either one of those ideas. So whilst I'm looking for my elusive subject, I thought I'd just mention kits. You'll see that I'm not carrying a tripod this morning, and the reason for that is the dandelion seed heads are so fragile that they only take an accidental knock and the seeds just end up on the ground or in the sky floating away, and I certainly don't want that. I also want to be able to be free to move around and try different angles without the restrictions of having to mess around with a tripod all the time. And it's certainly much easier for this type of work to not have one. Now in terms of lens, I've got the 120mm macro, currently set on f4 because I like this very shallow depth of field. The macro lens, obviously, as the name suggests, allows me to work very close, gives me magnifications of 1:1 or life size. That's really important to get that nice soft out of focus background and foreground, just to isolate the subjects whilst going in really close on small items. In terms of settings, other than the aperture, I'm actually on aperture priority. I don't often work in aperture priority, but because the brightness of the scene is changing all the time, I want at least something to be fixed. So on aperture priority, I can just put it on f4 and let the camera deal with the shutter speeds, and as long as those shutter speeds are fast enough, then I'm happy with that. If I find that the light goes and the shutter speeds are too slow, I can always just pop the ISO up just to bring the shutter speeds back to where I need them to be. But it just means that I don't have to worry too much about settings and lighting. I can just concentrate on the composition. I think that's probably about it. If you don't have a macro lens, you can use close-up filters or extension tubes as a standard lens, and you'll get a similar effect, if not the same effect, with those. So I will continue to look for a needle in a haystack, as it would seem. So I've managed to find an individual that's worth shooting. The problem I've been having, as you can just see now, is that the sun keeps coming out, and I really don't want that, because that just doesn't really work in my opinion. It's just too contrasty, although the grasses do become a nice lime green, but the seed head itself being white just doesn't work. So I prefer the more subdued light. As I said before, f4 is what I'm working on, and I'm just isolating the flower head and just manually focusing on the nearest point, and just holding it nice and steady and just shooting it when the wind's not blowing. Now, what I've done is I've flattened a little bit of the grasses in the immediate vicinity of the flower head, just because even at f4, any blades of grass that are close to the seed head will become a distraction. So I just want a bit of separation around it, and what I'm doing just to create some softness throughout the scene is just shooting through this vegetation here at the front of the lens, and just allowing the lens to focus through it, and that just creates a nice softness to the image, almost like it's like putting an Orton effect on, but you're actually doing it in the field with the out of focus grasses, and it looks really nice. And the actual stem of the plant, because it's lower than these grasses in the foreground, the stem just disappears, or mostly disappears, into the green surroundings. I suppose the only problem with it at f4 is the whole of the clock head is not in sharp focus, which I suppose I would prefer, but you can't have everything. It's because I'm working so close that depth of field is so minimal that I can't quite get the whole thing in sharp focus, but it looks really quite nice, so I'll put that on now. So the image that I really have concluded with in my search around the field was this cluster just here, and one of the things that I had in my mind's eye for this morning was quite an artistic shot of the dandelion clocks. And the reason I like this particular group is because it's got a nice tight cluster of seed heads, and what that enabled me to do was to get in close with the camera and focus on just one tiny little point at where the tips, the tops of the seeds are visible, and all the rest, all the surrounding area of the image is just soft out of focus white. And with single heads, they're just too small to be able to get in close enough to do that, so I've just used various parts of the other clock heads to sort of provide that outer focus area by just shooting through them and focusing on a little area at the back, and that's created this lovely white misty ethereal look around the image, the outside of the image, and you've just got this centre spot of nice sharp pin sharp seed heads just off to the right hand side. Now what I'm going to do is where the seeds attach to the top of the stem of the dandelion, you've got this quite dark almost blob in the middle of the image that you've got to be mindful of. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to reduce the contrast of it, take the colour out of it, reduce the saturation of that area, because it looks like a sort of an orangey spot. Reduce the saturation of that and also reduce the contrast of it, so it's not as intrusive within the scene, and you're just able to focus your attention on the tips of the seed heads, which are really beautiful. I've gone for 3 particularly sharp areas, and then the rest just falls off into nice softness all around. So I'll put that image on now. So this is the location of my second shot, and as you can see, an absolute sea of cow parsley. This little area, tiny patch of plantation woodland, again another location really close to where I live, and I pass it regularly. I've just never got round to photographing it. Now the image that I'm going to take here is absolutely not planned at all. I have no clue what the final image is going to look like. It's going to be purely based on just having a look around and trying different angles. Annoyingly, the sun's come out and there's quite a few hot spots. Now creatively they might actually work to my advantage, I'm not sure, but what I really wanted was flat white for this, but you work with what you've got. Again, no tripod, because honestly there's just no way you can work a tripod in here. These things are just wherever you touch, everything just shakes. So I'm just going to have to stick to the little footpath that I'm on at the moment and just work, try different not so much lenses, but different distances. I'm going to be using the 100mm macro again, but just different distances to the subject, just using the other plants in the foreground and background to a creative effect. I'm not looking for an image that's just a study of the plant here. I'm looking for something a little bit more creative. So time to find a little empty spot to get the bag off and get to work. So I've been working this particular spot for about half an hour now, and I've got some images, and certainly one I'm pretty happy with. The main problem that I've had, whilst it would appear that there's lots of cow parsley to go at, well there is, but because of the type of shot I'm trying to get, the trunks of the trees in the background are really easily allowed to creep into the frame in the corners. It's just not easy at all trying to exclude those. I'm trying as much as possible to only have the other cow parsleys in the background, but like I say, if I'm not careful, they do creep into the top of the frame. So what I've composed is this flowering head here. This is a plant known as an umbellifer. It's within a group of plants such as hogweeds are also in this group, and this sort of radiating flower head here, I'm focusing through this, a technique that I do quite often, but allowing it to remain somewhat sharp, so it leaves little white speckles on the frame and softens the background, softens the foreground in front of the background. And then I'm trying to, as much as possible, make the background look like almost like a wallpaper scene, where there's lots of repetition of shapes and colours, and even distribution of greens and whites. But there is a flower head just here that is forming. It's more by accident than design, but it's given a bit of a focal point to the overall scene, which I do quite like. So not quite an abstract, but definitely not your typical study of the plant. So fingers crossed it comes out as it seems to look on the back of here. So I'll put that on now. Just watching someone doing aerobatics. It's typical that when you want to do your little piece to the camera that there's a plane overhead making all sorts of noises. So I'm going to leave it there and say thank you all so much for watching once again. Let me know in the comments below what you think of today's images. Now next week hopefully I will be back in the woodlands. My plan is to catch the bluebells before they finish, and maybe some of the wild garlic. I don't know whether I might just be a bit too late for that already, but it was nice to do something a little bit different today, something less obvious, but no less glamorous, I have to say. So as always, I will see you all in the next one, so until then, bye for now.